you just notice this mindset shift of people like, oh wait, that's how it works. So the mindset shift at the end of the day, when you do shadow work, is all about when you're triggered, when you're jealous, when you go through an emotion. We're so good when we are so blind for ourselves, at least, to really project a lot of shit from ourselves towards the outer world. But there are so many treasures in those emotions.
Welcome to the Mindpoint Dream podcast, all about how to not lose sight of what's really important while chasing your dreams. Today's guest is Zoe van Liere, also known as Professional Wild Child. She's the founder of the Shadow Work School, which sounds more nefarious than it actually is. It's all about bringing the ideas at the back of your mind that are in your subconscious and bring them to your conscious mind so you can deal with them and understand yourself truly and move on with your life. It's work that she loves doing, and you're able to understand this from when you hear her speak. I hope you enjoy listening. Welcome, Zoe, to Mindpoint Driven. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
How we actually met is a bit funny. So we both attended the same webinar by our friends Hassan and Ash, talking about unfair advantage. And we were both talking in the chat, and then I noticed your Instagram after that and saw how much amazing work you've done and how different a path it is to what many people choose to take. And going down this path, was there anywhere along the line where you got advice that you really disagreed with and you think that could have led you away from what makes you happy today?
Well, actually, I think a common advice that I personally gave a lot back in the day is something that I currently disagree with. So back when I started, it was 2011, 2012. And I started off with setting up a Dutch platform that was all about living free, adventurous, more conscious life. And I was hosting events, and it was basically like a blogger collective. And that grew immensely back in the day. And that was really, that was a project that really came from my heart. So I also used to write a lot about what my heart was telling me and following my dreams. And of course, that is something that is also said a lot and almost romanticized in a way, follow your heart. Up to the point where my heart also led me into a toxic relationship, because my heart was telling me that this was the guy, my guy, and I really needed to be with him. Although actually in the total beginning already with him, my intuition told me something completely different. And it was that time that I needed. I was in this toxic relationship for 2 years. In the end, also experienced emotional and psychological abuse in the household that we shared. And when we broke up, I went through a whole awakening within myself and my personality type, and how basically we as human beings are wired, how we are set up, how through how many illusions we're basically going all the freaking time in life. And that was also the point where I realized, like, okay, but this is not a thing about following your heart. It should be follow your intuition, because actually we are the only animals in the animal kingdom that are so horrible in listening to our intuition. If you see a reindeer and it is frightened, it runs away immediately. And we somehow tend to give people a chance, although our intuition is telling us, like, no, run away. So I think follow your heart should actually be follow your intuition.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that as well is when people talk about their authentic self, say you need to follow your authentic self, sometimes they're actually referring to the person they were many years ago. And I think that your authentic self changes over time. So as you said, like, what you thought before you had that relationship versus afterwards was different because you learned more, you grew, and you learned from the terrible experience you had. And obviously, I'm really happy that you came out the other side and you feel stronger and happier now. And I think it's really interesting because when you're in that relationship, if you thought, I need to stick to my authentic self, that might have been the person who was giving in to this abuse in some way and letting yourself get blamed, which is obviously completely wrong, and you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to think about it in that terms as well, of what's right for me and is this making me happy, rather than if you say define yourself as somebody who's in that relationship, I'm this person's partner, that can be really bad for you in the long term.
Yeah, I think if we are truly open for all the lessons that life is teaching us, and we do the inner work and we do the shadow work, it actually brings us closer and closer to our authentic self if we are really open for it. So I do honestly see that my authentic self was already sort of covered under my persona and my mask. I just really wasn't able to see it clearly, and now I can actually bring my authentic self more to the surface.
You mentioned shadow work there as well, so some people listening today won't really know what that is. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm the big shadow work ambassador by now, I believe. I'm a big shadow work fan. So shadow work basically comes from psychology. Carl Jung has brought it to the West. It's a very down-to-earth practice to get to know yourself better and actually truly feel more free within yourself. The shadow basically stands for the unconscious. What a lot of people don't know is that we run through life pretty much unconsciously. 95% of life and our days we go through unconsciously. And with doing shadow work, we basically make the unconscious conscious. So with that being said, you can basically also say that the shadow is basically a part of ourselves that we do not see. It's not even a thing of not being willing to see. It's just really something that we repress, and it's out of our awareness. And it is hidden in our emotions, in our triggers, in our projections, in our patterns, but also in our form of humor, for example. And I think it's wildly fascinating because as soon as you shift your being, basically, as soon as you start shadow work, you instantly get a different type of mindset in life, also in how we go through our days, but also when you see other people, I don't know, acting out or saying certain things. And it's just like, okay, wait. But everything is basically saying something about ourselves.
What made you be interested in this topic in the first place? Were you going through a tough time and you used shadow work to help you get out of that? Or where did this come from?
It sort of naturally came to me. I don't remember or recall how exactly, but as I just mentioned, when I went through my breakup of this toxic relationship, I went through like an actual dark night of the soul awakening kind of phase. It almost feels like a trend nowadays to say that, but it definitely felt that way. And that by now is 2 years ago. And somehow I bumped into shadow work. So I started deepening my knowledge. And what triggered me back then the most was actually that I found out that this was a toxic relationship and that I can really identify with the concept of being an empath, and that I took over his emotions and his energies as if they were mine. So I went through this whole phase of, whoa, I never saw that about myself before, that I was also really open to say, okay, but then there must be so much more that I don't know about myself. And I want to find out what that is. And that is the essence of shadow work. So I started deepening my knowledge about it and really started to investigate how I can discover more from myself, about myself, without having to go through another toxic relationship. Because I think the toxic relationship was basically just a catalyst of my biggest shadows, myself.
You mentioned you started your Dutch platform many years ago now. What made you start that in the first place? And how long was it before it became your full-time role?
I was studying at the University of Amsterdam, and I was also working there. And that made me feel so depressed already. The whole 9 to 5 kind of work lifestyle kind of thing was really not for me. I saw a lot of people in the midst of their steady jobs, but they were just really sitting out the day, they weren't living life. And it really, for me, felt like they weren't living their authentic selves. I think everybody has something to offer, but so many of us are stuck in trying to survive, I think, mostly. And I wanted to do something creative. And I knew a lot of people around me, and I wanted to bring them, or I knew a lot of people that wanted to make a positive impact on the world, and I wanted to bring them together. So I started to organize an event, and I did that under the name Moderne Hippies, Modern Day Hippies. And that was back in 2011. And somehow it was really very fitting in that time, because it was sort of just before fair fashion became a thing, just before this whole plant-based vegan trend became super popular. So I think the collective consciousness was really rising in that time. And my Dutch platform was sort of just like was really picking up on the trend of that, and was bringing these people together that wanted to make a positive impact and simply do better. And therefore it also became really popular in those years, and especially the events were massive in 2013-14. Although I wasn't able to identify with being an entrepreneur, I somehow sort of accidentally created something that a lot of people liked.
When did you go full time into this world?
Well, actually, already back then, I can't say that I was financially abundant back then. I really had no clue how to make money. I think, which is also nice in a way to now mention, is that when you talk about the authentic self and the false self in a way, is that although I wanted to do that, my empath nature basically really wants to make the world, like in a desperate way, almost a better place. And I take a lot of heavy things from the world personally, as if I need to change everything, which of course you can't. And we have to do this as a collective, and we need to make tiny steps, and we need to keep it real mostly. And I was also organizing these events, although my false personality basically knows that I, of all people, shouldn't organize events needing to basically facilitate a room of thousands of people, although I'm taking over all their emotions and energies, and I'm basically just worn out the week after. So I think I was always very resistant towards this whole 9 to 5 kind of life. And then I also had this thing going that was actually quite popular. So I just tried to make it a full-time job for myself. And then I just did like a whole mixture of content creation, events, and also freelancing. And it gave me a lot of, the platform stood for living a free, adventurous, and conscious lifestyle. And I also myself was able to lead one.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is that you started everything in Dutch originally, right? And now you're doing more things in English. And even before we started recording, you kind of mentioned that sometimes you can struggle to mix between the languages. Was it something that scared you early on, where you started doing more content in English? Were you worried about that at all? Because I know there were some people listening today where English isn't their first language, but they know that they can reach a wider audience with it.
Yeah, it was always my struggle. And I have to say that it still is, because when I started off with my Dutch platform, I always felt like a world citizen. I never truly felt Dutch. You know, there's a lot of Dutch people that truly feel Dutch, but I just feel like I also love to live abroad. I have lived abroad. I work from abroad. And then obviously I also spoke more English. And I also had a lot of friends abroad. So for me, it just made sense that, especially with something as modern day hippies, that you make it more international. But of course, the last 2 years, I've also pretty much nonstop been in the Netherlands. So now I feel very Dutch. And now I also sometimes still, also on my Instagram, I go back and forth here and there, depending on the subject, maybe, if sometimes something is in Dutch. But at the end of the day, you just really need to make content with what feels good to you. And I definitely have to say that my YouTube channel mostly, and I do that in English, just gave me so much fulfillment, because I really had the feeling that I attracted like-minded women mostly, who go through life pretty independently and love to travel and love life, but also love to explore more about themselves. So it gave me truly the feeling of a community.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I want to take a quick break to ask you to check in on yourself. There's many people struggling with balance, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. The tips that my guests and I share can hopefully help you along the way, but if you already feel overwhelmed or burnt out, it's probably best that you ask somebody for help too. For some, this might be a friend or family member, but others might feel like they have nobody they can talk to. If you're one of these people, check out the link in the show notes. It's for United for Global Mental Health. They've got helplines all across the world with people willing to listen on the other side. It's important to let somebody know how you're feeling. Now, back to the show.
And you mentioned there about traveling and working while you're traveling. How did you find that experience? Because it's something which I've been thinking about myself. Do I want to do the digital nomad side of things or not? Because I also like having a base in London, and I have all my friends and family here too. And I've got so much that I enjoy about the city too. How have you found that process when you lived abroad and came back, and what was that experience like for you?
I think it's heavily romanticized also. For me, at least, I definitely struggled sometimes with working abroad, especially in 2016 when I tried it from Cape Town, which is my big love. I love to come there. But back then, the internet was just horrible. And I was just starting out with my YouTube channel. So it took me a day sometimes to just upload a video. So of course then you really notice how privileged you are, first and foremost, as you're living in the Netherlands, and how quick things go here, especially around internet and the connection and everything around it. So it definitely hasn't always been easy, but the other side of it, of course, is just the freedom that it takes, or that it gives, that you're able to do that, is beautiful. So here and there for a few weeks, I would definitely do it again. Where are you thinking about going?
Oh, I could go to Amsterdam. You never know.
You
I
have good
think
Wi-Fi here most of the times.
I think a lot of the people I work with are either East Coast or West Coast of the US. So I want to meet a lot of them because I've had so many chats with them and Zoom calls. It would be really nice to meet them in person. But at the same time, I could go anywhere. So I've done quite a lot of travel pre-pandemic when I started my consulting job. So there's lots of places I've been to that I've liked. And I think one of my biggest problems is that I have too much choice. If I had to decide to work abroad for a bit, where would I go? Because I like so many places. So it's easy to just not think about it than to try to analyze all those different things. Like, where would I go? And like I said, one of the big problems too is if I'm doing a lot of video work, you need to have a solid base and you need to have good Wi-Fi, and you don't want to be carrying around equipment all the time if you're moving around the country. And yeah, like you want to have that professional sheen to it as well. And one of the things that's quite stressful, which some people may not realize with traveling, is that if you're going for a country with a backpack or taking different forms of transport, that takes its toll on you as well. You need to recover from that. You need to have the rest in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's very true. I also really needed like almost an extra suitcase for all the equipment that you need to take with you, and it's very ungrounding to work like that. So yeah, it has its pros and cons.
And with the life in the Netherlands at the moment, is there any way you're struggling with your balance, or have you got a nice routine down?
I'm currently definitely just on a more practical level struggling with balance, just finding out what I'm gonna do again. I sometimes just have these phases where I just really have to reset. I'm also trying to surrender to the moment of not truly knowing. I have so many things that I would like to do in life still, but I really need to prioritize what that is. But I also highly believe that answers like those come naturally if you just allow pauses like this to happen. So definitely right now, I'm not in a very balanced state. And at the same time, I think for me, always in life, what I now can see, at least as being an empath, you always struggle with truly loving people, but also really needing to be alone. So for me, it will always be whenever I'm in a relationship, I always struggle with, I want to be in a relationship, but I also need a lot of alone time. And the same goes with just work, just balancing everything out. I just need so much time to recover just by living. I think life on itself can already be quite exhausting sometimes. Yeah.
One thing you've got too is that when people send you an email, because obviously I did this myself, you've got the auto response, which tells people what they can do. And obviously it saves you a lot of time, right? Because I get a lot of people who might send me emails and ask me different questions where I kind of need to reply, but it'd be better like what you've got to just have the auto filter, right? So you want to do this, go here. You want to do that, go there. Has that helped you a lot? And is there other techniques as well that you've used in the past?
Yeah, I think my auto reply is just really a prime example of truly setting boundaries, especially in this social media age where everybody can send you messages all the freaking time. I'm completely overwhelmed by it. And somehow, especially when you make content, of course, online, people also just really think that you can make that time because you're already making the time to make a video or a podcast or whatever. So you can also reply, but that just sums up constantly. So just like a strict auto reply is definitely recommended for everybody. Yeah, and I think other than that, also online, that I don't feel as guilty anymore if I don't reply in general. I think WhatsApp can also really create that feeling, especially from friends and family. Like hello, and I just think it's we're living in such an insane world that we should also that we should always stand on standby. It doesn't make any sense to me. So to normalize for myself that I answer slowly, no matter if it's towards my friends and family or online, is okay.
What you mentioned before about you following your intuition, does that mean that you don't tend to make longer term plans? Or do you have longer term goals, let's say, for the next couple of years? Or do you just let yourself go with the flow?
I do think that I don't make a lot of long term plans anymore. I think that I used to make long term plans more in my 20s, but I can also see that certain long term plans were more ego driven and not necessarily coming out of my authentic self. By now, I can definitely like it to work towards goals and still work towards my dreams, but then definitely keep checking in with truly my gut feeling if this is right. And that is a constant challenge. If you're also talking about balance in life, I think we actually every day should do like an intuition check-in.
You said you're working towards your dreams. What are your dreams?
My dreams right now, at least on the one hand, are very down to earth in the sense of I just really want to have a steady, loving, warm home base. I have 2 cats by now. I really consider them being my family also. So, and I think especially if you have gone through a phase where living in a home that feels unsafe, we really cannot take for granted that you can just truly be yourself at home and live in a household where everybody is accepting you and everything is just you can truly be yourself. So it's my dream to just truly be myself always at home. And working wise, I would love to publish more books. I still have a lot of old content that I also just want to make a book about, I think, from, and continue with making videos. And what has currently just really given me so much fulfillment is creating these communities that are more out of the social media realm. So my shadow work school now, for example, is just really an example for me that throughout social media, I attracted these like-minded women. They're all into this similar type of work. And then away from Instagram and away from YouTube and all the followers and likes and everything that is actually not so important, we actually truly come together and form a community. And we do the work together. And that has been so beautiful. I think community is just it.
How do you, with that community, how does that work? Like, so if, say, somebody listening today wants to be part of a kind of similar community or build a community like that themselves, what would that look like?
I'm also currently still figuring it out because this for me is also new. For me, the Shadow Work School is really a program that people follow for 6 weeks. And then we have live sessions and we really come together and we can be vulnerable together. So that is a community on itself. But I also, of course, there are also communities these days that you can really become a member of and you're part of the community the entire year. Yeah, could also be the case. I think it's very important to at least find your tribe, especially when you're into these type of topics.
How much of it for you as well is in people you're meeting in real life? Because obviously a lot of your work is online, but do you enjoy meeting people in real life and having the community there too?
I do, but I do have to say that for me, as an introverted empath, highly sensitive person, that online is just heavenly.
You obviously work with so many people and you've helped so many people over the years. What's one mindset shift you think somebody listening today could make that would make a positive difference to the way they view their lives?
Yeah, so like I just mentioned, the very first lesson that I do with the Shadow Work School contains like a questionnaire. And with question 4, you just notice this mindset shift of people like, oh, wait, that's how it works. So the mindset shift at the end of the day, when you do shadow work, is all about when you're triggered, when you're jealous, when you go through an emotion. We're so good when we are so blind for ourselves, at least, to really project a lot of shit from ourselves towards the outer world. But there are so many treasures in those emotions if you allow yourself to explore them truly. Yeah, so shadow work truly is golden, I think, and that creates a mindset shift big time, absolutely. And I'm definitely not a sales type of person. That's the funny thing. Over the 10 years that I worked for myself, I have never been able to set up a program and really sell it. But this is type of work that I genuinely believe in it, and it makes yourself and the world a whole lot better. Have you ever done it?
Shadow work?
Yeah.
No, not yet. No,
No.
I guess it's got to be on the list.
Oh my God.
When I come to work in Amsterdam, we can do it then.
Yeah,
we can do it online when I come to Amsterdam because you don't want to meet in person.
No, we can do it offline as well.
Okay.
One-on-one is okay. One-on-one is okay.
Okay, yeah. So what I was going to say is, somebody interviewed the other day, Adam Earhart. What he said is that marketing, people think is very sleazy, but it's really about, if you think something can add value to somebody's life and you're trying to share that message, then that's not salesy. That's you trying to help people. And that's a real aim of what you're doing. And with shadow work and the shadow work school, is that you're helping people who you think can benefit from what you're doing and benefit from the philosophies that you've learned and applied to yourself.
Absolutely. It's the most liberating thing that you can do. So it's also therefore genuinely not a sales promo, because it's you do, I think, need to be ready to do this work, because it is, especially in the beginning, it can be uncomfortable. It can also be very confronting. You just really bump into things that you have been repressing your entire life, basically. You have to be open to open that Pandora box. And once it's open, you can't go back.
As we wrap up now, if people listening today, they want to find out more about shadow work, find out more about what you do, where would you send them? Where can they find out more?
I think even if you Google Shadow Work School, then you also bump into my website. Generally, people can find me under Professional Wild Child. So I have a YouTube channel, Instagram, and also my website is also professionalwildchild.com.
Perfect. And the final question I ask all of my guests is, what's one small thing that's brought you joy recently?
I'm currently also hosting a little community, and we're doing the January dance challenge, in which we have to do a little dance every day. I really believe in dancing. You don't have to do that for your profession, but it is so good to get into your body and out of your mind. So I also say one dance a day keeps the doctor away. And I also recently heard in another podcast that you also like to dance.
I dabble a little bit.
Very good. Do you also do a dance a day?
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes one thing I do, and I guess I'm admitting this on the podcast now, is as a little break, I'll just play music and just dance around the flat. And it just gets me out of my head, gets me stopping thinking about what I'm thinking about, and just refreshes me a bit, gives me a bit of energy, and then I can go back to whatever I was doing.
Exactly. That. It's the little things.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It really helps to get the message out further. Wherever you're listening, it would be awesome if you could subscribe and to share on your social media channels. If you want to see more of my work and advice, you can find all of the links in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.